Training camp is here, and that means some of the biggest questions for the 49ers need to be answered. Questions are going to be answered in training camp, they're going to be answered in the preseason. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to talk about the top questions the 49ers need answered, all that and more in this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Training camp here. The 49ers are reporting to training camp, and with it comes some questions. The 49ers, just like every NFL team, are entering training camp with optimism, with hope, and 49er fans are hoping that this is that year that they get to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. But February is a long ways away. And right now, we're in the end of July and training camp is upon us. And we're going to set our eyes on the 49ers out at camp and then eventually in the preseason. And along the way, there's going to have to be some things that need to be answered. Some of them are giving us an idea of how players are going to be used. For some, they're a big pivotal reason as to why the 49ers will either win or lose and how they overcome some of the obstacles that are going to be facing them. It's going to be an interesting training camp, because there's still some things that haven't been decided. There's some changes from last year. There were years that the 49ers came into seasons and it felt like it was all systems go, and Kyle Shanahan has done a very good job of putting together a well-oiled machine. But every year there's just change, and it's getting tougher and tougher for the San Francisco 49ers to keep their roster together, which means more and more pressure to win a Super Bowl now. And the 49ers are in a win-now situation. And for them to win now, these 10 questions that I'm going to be going over need to be answered. And if they are, and they're answered in a positive direction, the San Francisco 49ers are going to be on their way to not only having a great season, but potentially getting the number one seed in the playoffs, potentially winning the NFC, and maybe even winning the Super Bowl. And like I said, that's a long ways to go. So we're going to focus now on training camp. We're going to focus on the preseason and what things need to be answered as far as those go. But please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening on audio platform 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give me a 5-star rating. I'd really appreciate it. If you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online. The game starts here. So first off, we got Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch talking to media today. So they talked to the media about the season and what's upcoming. And of course, the 49ers practice will begin on Wednesday. Wednesday, 10:25 practice. And then Kyle Shanahan will have a press conference. And then there will be some players that are going to speak on Wednesday. On Thursday, there will be a 10:25 practice. And following practice, Nick Sorensen will be speaking in the press conference. And Thursday is the first day that practice is available to the open public. So public can show up on Thursday. That'll be the first time that they're able to get their eyes on the San Francisco 49ers. And that'll be interesting to listen to what Nick Sorensen has to say. And, of course, there'll be players available there. On Friday, practice is available to be open to the public if you plan on going. Chris Furster will have a press conference at 9:30 before practice, and then practice will be at 10:25. Saturday, they will have practice at 10:25. At Kyle Shanahan will have a press conference. That is not open to the public. So only beat writers will be there, and people with press passes will be at practice. Sunday, the 28th, the players have the day off, and there's no media availability. Monday, they're back at it at 10:25 a.m. for practice. That is open to the public. Tuesday, 10:25, practice is open, and that'll be interesting. And then Wednesday, practice, 10:25, and is open. And then on, of course, those days, you have Kyle Shanahan available on Monday, Brian Schneider available on Tuesday, and Nick Sorensen available on Wednesday. Thursday, August 1st, there's no media availability that day. That's a day off. The 49ers are back with open practices on the 2nd, on the 3rd. And so that kind of concludes the first 2 weeks of what training camp practice is going to look like, and all the information that we're going to get. 49ers going with 4 days initially. I'm guessing Wednesday is going to be a very light practice as they integrate the players into the practice setting, and then Thursday they'll ramp it up a little bit in front of the fans and media alike, and then Friday the same thing. Then they'll kind of taper down on Saturday before they give the players a day off on Sunday. Kyle Shanahan and his staff has got this thing worked out down to a T now on how they handle business. But let's get into these 10 things to watch during training camp and preseason. And the first thing at number 10 that I'm really interested to see is how the San Francisco 49ers use Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing. And I know right now, Ricky Pearsall's been on the NFI, but he's going to be used a certain way, and that's what we want to find out. We heard Kyle Shanahan talk about when he was drafted that Pearsall could play all three positions, which means you could play him at X, which is what Brandon Ayuk plays. You could play him at Z, which Deebo Samuel plays, or you could play him in the slot, where Jawan Jennings often plays, and sometimes they'll move Deebo or whoever around, depending on formation and look. But where will Ricky Pearsall predominantly line up? Is he going to be a backup Z for Deebo Samuel? Is he going to play in the slot and play him and Jawan Jennings split time there? Or will he honestly get reps at all three positions? Because I think that also determines how they use the personnel they have behind him. But just seeing how involved Ricky Pearsall is going to be in the offense early on is going to give the 49ers offense a clear view on what it's going to look like. Same with Jacob Cowing. Is Jacob Cowing going to play in the slot? Does that mean he's going to be splitting time with Jawan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, and Jacob Cowing? That would make it tough for him to be able to produce in year one, which would mean he would just get limited gadget plays and some unique looks. Where if he's going up and lining up outside at X and being a backup X for Brandon Ayuk, potentially has more opportunities to get playing time. Last year, it was supposed to be Danny Gray at X, and then Danny Gray got hurt. So then Ronnie Bell got moved to X, and he got those reps. So you can see that it can give you more opportunity. So finding out where Ricky Pearsall plays, where Jacob Cowing lines up, is going to be very important. For Pearsall, if he's taking reps at all three positions, it means he's the first player in case of a break or an injury. So that means Brandon Ayuk is out for a play, Ricky Pearsall's in. Deebo's out for a play, more than likely Ricky Pearsall's in, which means he can have some opportunities to produce within this 49ers offense. That's why it's important to see how he's going to be used. Also, how much are we going to get of different sets? And probably at training camp, we won't see a lot of different personnel groupings. 49ers go with their install, especially early on. So install means you're running your base offense. 49ers base offense is primarily built in 21 personnel. So they'll run a lot of the 2 running back, 1 tight end look, and then they kind of work off that. But at some point, especially when we get into 7-on-7 work, you get into some of the 11-on-11, which is full team scrimmage. I want to see how much the 49ers run their 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers on the field, or how much they run at 10 personnel, where they get 4 wide receivers. The first time, really, in the Kyle Shanahan era, that you have 4 legitimate wide receivers that could potentially do some damage. And how will that spread out the 49ers defense in training camp, but ultimately a look at what it could look like in the season? I think it's tremendously interesting what they do there. And of course, with all things, we don't know, who's going to be on the field when, but this is going to give us a better idea of usage. And as training camp goes, how they ramp up usage for certain players. But Pearsall and Cowing are the first ones that I'm really taking a look at to see where they're going to be and how much of an impact they make. Because if Cowling is backup X, Danny Gray might as well be off this football team. Really good chance that he's gone already right from the get-go. But if he's playing in the slot, that gives Danny Gray a shot to make it as the backup X receiver. You can see why those things make a lot of sense. Now, number 9, and a lot of people might not, really care about this, but I think it's very interesting, is how is Cameron Latu going to look in year 2? I think that plays into the decision that they have to make, is who's going to be tight end 2. I think Cameron Latu and his ability to help this football team and where he lines up and how he looks is going to be interesting. I think, first off, who's getting tight end 2 reps? Is it Braden Willis because he's been in the offense for a full year? Or is it going to be Logan Thomas, who, I presume is going to be tight end 2? I know Kyle Shanahan said he was brought in to compete, but you're talking about a guy who showed a lot of success last season, 55 catches, almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's better than all the other tight ends on the 49ers combined that back up George Kittle. So he's the most accomplished out of all of them. But Cameron Latu's interesting because I believe they haven't given up on him yet. I think that you see a young player that struggled mightily in his last year's training camp. And we've seen players do this before and they've been able to rebound. You look at Aaron Banks. Banks was a guy that struggled so bad in his rookie year in training camp, and it looked like he was a bust. Then he comes back and he has a really good sophomore season, starts every single game at left guard, and we know we've got a legitimate left guard on our hands. He's probably the second best offensive lineman on the team behind Trent Williams. So it doesn't always mean that you're going to struggle, but if he comes out and he has the same struggles that he had in year 1 as a rookie, more than likely Cameron Latu is going to be out the door. But I think I'm one of the ones that really hopes, and I hope that the 49er fan base hopes as well, that Cameron Latu comes out and plays really well, that he comes out and plays up to the expectations the 49ers had. I would love to see another young, athletic tight end that's able to win in the passing game be a part of this 49ers football team. Now, he's got to answer questions like, can I line up in the right spot? Can I remember to go in motion? And can I please catch the dang football? But if those things look like they're more in order because he's more in tune with this 49ers offense and he's not thinking as much, the 49ers could have another weapon on their hands. And we'd love to see this tight end room go from every single year not meeting the expectations of what it could be to over meeting those expectations. Exceeding expectations would be huge for the 49ers. You got Logan Thomas, if he was playing really well, and Cameron Latu playing well, and Braden Willis playing pretty well. 2 young cats to go along with 2 key veterans. You'd feel like that tight end position went from being a weakness to an absolute strength. So that's something that's going to be interesting. Can Latu go from the player that once dropped the football and kicked the pylon and punted it in training camp to the guy that's making plays and winning in his opportunities? I think that's going to be curious. And then it's also curious because there's been a lot of talk of who is tight end 2. Is it Logan Thomas? Is it Braden Willis? Is it Eric Saubert? It's going to be a lot of fun. Tight end position is definitely something I'm watching. And, of course, reps at the position as well. How many reps is Braden Willis and Cameron Latu actually getting? I think they'll get a lot. George Kittle, I'm sure they'll tone down his reps and keep him nice and fresh during training camp. Number 8, what changes have Coach Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley made to the defense from last year? And of course, install is one thing. They're going to install this defense like they always do, and that will look pretty much the same. You'll get the same sort of shell looks, your cover 3 shell. You'll see your cover 4. They'll run some man principles. Like, things will look the same. You're still going to get the wide 9. You're still going to get the cover 3 defense, the same drops. It's going to look the same there. But there's also subtle changes. Last year, Steve Wilks made some subtle changes to how the cornerbacks aligned, how their vision was looking into the backfield. Will that stay the same? Will their alignment with their nickel corners stay the same? Will their safeties play the same way with a left and right designation compared to a free safety, strong safety look? Those types of things I'm very interested in. I'm also interested, once they start installing blitz packages, what it looks like. If it looks more Steve Wilks style blitz packages, where it's more zone blitz scheme, or if it looks more like what you were seeing from D'Amico, where you saw a lot of A-gap looks from Fred Warner and from other linebackers, and then also nickel corner blitzes coming off the edge. I'm curious how they line them up, how they disguise them. All those things we're going to start seeing a little bit during install. And of course, when a lot of that stuff is happening, no one can record, no one can video what's going on. So it's all about being there and actually seeing it. So I'm excited to see all that. And of course, a lot of that's not going to be answered in preseason. If you watch the preseason games, you're not going to see the intricacies, the unique looks that those two guys are going to have in store for the 49ers defense, because they're going to save all those for the regular season. In preseason, most of it is completely vanilla offense and defense. They're just going out there and trying to execute base stuff they run every single year. That's a part of their install. So that way they can get looks at certain players and how they play in and play out. So it's more about evaluating than scheming when it comes to preseason. So your only shot to see it is at training camp. And hopefully the right people are watching and then they're relating what they're seeing. And sometimes you have to just look and understand what you're seeing, and sometimes you don't, and that's okay. But I think it's going to be unique to see what changes that Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley have made to the defense, how much it's returned to the old style of D'Amico Ryans, which I think is going to be vastly similar to, and then how many new little wrinkles they come with their understanding of Pete Carroll's defense and what happened in Seattle in that cover 3, and also Vic Fangio's defense and Brandon Staley's involvement running that in Denver, and then what he did in Los Angeles. It's going to be interesting, this hybrid model, and some of the players that are going to be in it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that's number 8. Number 7 kind of plays off of that. Who is cornerback 3, and where is Demo and Renardo Green playing? So we know who the top 2 cornerbacks on the San Francisco 49ers are. Tarvarius Ward, who's returning from a core muscle injury that he had surgery for, expected to be out there and ready to go. And Deommodore Lenoir, who played such a versatile role for the 49ers, playing outside corner in base sets and then in nickel package, going to the nickel spot. But the 49ers addressed cornerback 3 potentially in 2 different avenues. Number 1, they signed Isaac Yiadom, cornerback from New Orleans. And you just go back and watch Yiadom playing in those games, and he played really good. Of course, just like all cornerbacks, there's bad plays, but PFF graded him out to an 80. That's really close to Tarvarius Ward. Ward was about an 85, so you'll get an idea of how good Isaac Yiadom played last year in his 8 starts, including 14 pass defenses. Fantastic. So does he step into the Ambry Thomas role of last year and Deommodore Lenoir move inside? If that's the case, and we'll probably see it at training camp early and how they run those early reps as long as Tarvarius Ward's on the field. If Ward's not on the field, it's going to be Yiadom and Lenoir on the outside early. But when they go to nickel, what happens? If Lenoir moves inside and plays nickel for the most part and Yiadom plays outside, then we know Yiadom is going to be potentially cornerback 3. And they're planning on playing him in the Ambry Thomas role, and Demo's going to primarily play nickel corner. But they also brought in Renardo Green, and he could be the 3rd corner if he plays well enough that you feel like it's a better combination to have Demo, Renardo Green, and Tarvarius Ward than to have Demo, Tarvarius Ward, and Isaac Yiadom. And so potentially it just switches where Demo plays. If you get the great play from Renardo Green, the new draft pick, 2nd-round pick, and he's able to handle nickel corner, well, that means Deommodore Lenoir stays outside, and when you go to those nickel packages, 70 to 75% of the snaps, Green just comes in. Then you have tremendous depth with Isaac Yiadom on the outside and other guys, but that's going to be interesting to see. And we've heard about the fact that Renardo Green's going to be playing inside and then working outside and playing some outside corner as well. I think it's going to be interesting to see how everything matches up. My guess is that it's going to be Yiadom early, and we'll see what happens with Green. But I hope Deommodore Lenoir and is ready for the potential of playing outside all the time, because I think Green is going to impress early. The guy flies around and makes plays, but that's something to keep an eye on, especially if you're going to be at training camp. And then also how they play during the preseason could be a huge determining factor. Number 6, who is linebacker number 3? Is it DFF, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, or is it going to be D. Winters? I think the presumption is that Devondre Campbell is going to step into the Dre Greenlaw role as will linebacker, former All-Pro, veteran that they brought in to bridge that gap and be a cushion in that department. But who's that other guy? D. Winters has been getting praise from Fred Warner, And they said he had some of the best OTAs he's ever had. And that means he's acclimated to the NFL game. But Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles has a tremendous relationship with Fred Warner, with Dre Greenlaw. He's got a good relationship with Coach Hollins. He's been here. He understands this scheme. And the first thought process would be, let's go with the veteran. And I think that's what you might see early on in training camp. There's a real possibility when they line up over the first, couple weeks that you see Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles taking first-team reps as Sam linebacker, and Fred Warner and Mike, and then Devondre Campbell at will. I think at some point, D. Winters is going to get an opportunity to go take that spot. And that is the best case scenario for the 49ers. So finding when that moment is that D. Winters gets able to step in there with those top two linebackers next to him is going to be very important, because Flanagan-Fowles as a starter is not the best situation for the 49ers. The best situation is a young player stepping in and taking that role. Whether that is D. Winters or Jalen Graham or Tatum Bethune, somebody needs to be linebacker 3 that's better than Flanagan-Fowles. And the 49ers know they've drafted the talent to do so. It's just got to go out there and play. So finding out who that guy is going to be is a very important question that needs to be answered in training camp in the preseason. And hopefully it'll be D. Winters doing it early and often. Number 5, who is taking first-team reps at center? Knee tendonitis for Jake Brendel. And, Jake Brendel, ready to go day one or not, it doesn't matter. At some point, knee tendonitis is a real problem. And John Feliciano took reps all during OTAs and minicamp at center. And John Feliciano, according to Chris Forster said that's his best position as center. And that's what he was really good at with the New York Giants. Though he plays guard, he was a center first with the New York Giants. So it's a guy that has potential and now has a firm grasp of this 49ers offense. Coming in year one, it would have been difficult because he didn't know the ins and outs of the offense. He didn't know the ins and outs of protection scheme, and he's got to figure those things out. So now that he's got that down, I fully expect John Feliciano, if he needs to step in at center. Now, here's where Jake Brendel runs into a little bit of a problem. If he's not out on the field and you allow Feliciano to get reps, that's not a good situation for you, because John Feliciano will play it very well. He anchors well as far as pass blocking, and that gives the opportunity to a couple of young guys. Spencer Burford, who already started a lot of games in his career over his first 2 seasons, and we know that he's got to rebound. He's got to play a lot better than last year, but he gets an opportunity if you move Feliciano to center because of Brendel's injury. That also gives Dominic Pooney, the new 3rd-round draft pick, an opportunity to compete with Spencer Burford and start getting second-team reps at guard. Could be huge for the 49ers. And so I think that Jake Brendel knows he needs to be out on the field. But if you start seeing Feliciano getting consistent reps at center, it could signal that the 49ers believe that Feliciano and one of those guards, Burford or Pooney, is actually a better combination than Brendel and Feliciano. So that's going to be something to watch. Going to be interesting to see how Brendel's knee responds, because I know he's going to go out there and gut it out. He doesn't miss football games, and so he is always going to be out there for practice. But if it starts flaring up and Feliciano gets his opportunity, as long as Feliciano does a really good job and then one of those young guys does a good job, we could see a little bit of a change at center, which I know would make a lot of people really, really happy. Number 4, when is Talanoa Hufanga going to be back at camp? Now, of course, he said his target is to come back at camp, and his target is to be ready for week 1. But when exactly does he come back? Because right now, he hasn't really built a lot of chemistry with Jair Brown. Jair Brown played limited snaps with Talanoa Hufanga in his rookie season. Hufanga played with Tashawn Gibson, and then when he got hurt, Gibson's the one that played most of the snaps with Jair. That's where the chemistry was. Hufanga is also usually the safety, and he was last year before the injury, that called who was going to do what. He used to tell Tashawn Gibson, hey, you play in the box, I'll play deep. Or, hey, I'm going in the box, you play deep. Left and right safeties. And so with Hufanga calling it all the time, there needs to be that trust from Jair Brown to Hufanga. And I expect Jair would listen to Hufanga, but I want them to just get used to gelling and playing together and seeing football the same way. We need a unified back end of the defense especially at the safety position. And a lot of people talk about how similar they are, but both of them can handle the roles that they need to handle within this defense. Plus, with Coach Nick Sorensen taking back over, there's probably going to be a return to the inside-out mentality that DeMeco Ryans brought to this defense, which means they're going to take everything away over the middle, and they're going to force everything outside. Guess who really has a good opportunity to make plays when that happens? Talanoa Hufanga and Jair Brown. I want them on the same page, but Hufanga's delay coming back not just hurts his communication and working with Jair Brown, but also means the 49ers might look to go with another safety in free agency, which could make some things interesting. Now, it'll give Malik Mustafa an opportunity to get out there on the field a little bit, but you really don't need that. You only carry 6 safeties during training camp. There's plenty of reps for all of them, and Malik Mustafa is going to get plenty of reps. What it means is if Talanoa Hufanga is not ready, George Odom is in the starting lineup, and Odom and Jair Brown are going to be practicing together. That's not the best defense for the 49ers. George Odom will do fine. He'll understand his role. He'll be where he's supposed to be, but he can't execute like Hufanga can. So Hufanga coming back is imperative, and I'm hoping he's back by week 3 of training camp so that way he can go through the process of the preseason games. I don't expect him to play during the preseason games, just so everyone knows, but that'll put him on target to be back for week 1, which the 49ers really, really want. So when's Hufanga going to be back is going to be a key. And then this one kind of starts hitting at practice, but more so when we get to the preseason. What are the new kickoff rules going to look like? What is it going to look like when it's actually ran with Coach Snyder? I did a whole video about this and all the rules. You can go back and find that on the channel. And it's one of the most interesting things because I think there's a lot of things that play into this, a lot of circumstances. You got, is Jake Moody or Mitch Wisnowski going to kick? That's number one. Because you're not just kicking a normal kickoff, you're trying to have a ball that's tough to field in a certain landing zone. And you've got to get the right height on it. You got to get the right length on it. There's a lot to play into it because now there's 3 different touchbacks. So there's a lot there just with the kickoff. Plus, who's going to play on kickoff? You know, your bigger, faster defensive ends, your linebackers, your running backs, your tight ends, big guys like that playing kickoff. And then on kickoff return, how many offensive linemen are going to be out there? Which guys are going to be returning? It's going to be a lot of fun. Do you go with your quick guys? Is it Danny Gray? Is it Jacob Cowing? Are those guys returning kicks? Or are you going to go with Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason and Isaac Arendo? Running back, wide receiver type, who's going to have the best returns? It's going to be great. This is an added aspect to NFL football that I wasn't expecting. I kept hoping they were going to do something to freshen up kickoff, and they're doing it. And a lot of people that are traditionalists don't really like it, but I feel like they kind of watered down kickoff so much already that now we're going to get to the point where something fresh and something new. It's a lot less risky as far as injury goes and a lot more entertaining. And this could change the game a little bit. We can start seeing more kick return touchdowns than we've seen in the past. So I'm interested to see how Snyder attacks it, what that means for Moody and Wisnowski, and also what that means when it comes to the return game and which personnel is playing. Because if it affects personnel, it could affect who makes this team. You might keep an extra tight end that can help you on kickoff and kickoff return over a defensive back because of size, or a wide receiver because of size and the way that they play those positions. So guys who are normally getting opportunities because of the positions they played might have less opportunities with new rules and new personnel playing them. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm curious what it looks like and how much impact it has early on in training camp when teams are trying different things during the preseason, and ultimately who's going to be back there. Which player comes out of nowhere? Every year, there's a player that comes out of nowhere that just impresses, and you start taking a look like, hey, man, that guy's doing something. And it doesn't always mean they hold on the entire season, but every year there seems to be a guy. There was Elijah Mitchell who came on the scene in training camp, and everyone was excited about how he was running, and then he did it in the preseason. Samuel Womack was having multiple interceptions in his rookie year in 2022, and he came out of nowhere. They're just guys that just come in and make plays. Dre Greenlaw in 2019, Deebo Samuel. There's guys that you look at and you're like, wow, those guys are coming out of nowhere, but they look like they're going to be a huge force for this team. who are going to be those guys this year? Who's going to be those guys that step up? Some people say it's going to be Cody Schrader. Some people say it's going to be Evan Anderson. Could it be someone like a Tatum Bethune who no one's talking about? Could it be him? Could it be Malik Mustafa? I just think it's going to be fun to see that player that ascends out of nowhere and makes a difference for the 49ers football team through training camp in the preseason. And just if they can make an impact on this team overall during the season. So it's really exciting. I think, there's a few guys that are going to have opportunities to make an impact, and I'm curious which ones those guys are going to be. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. Which player comes out of nowhere to make an impact on the San Francisco 49ers 2024 team? And then the number one thing I'm ready to see is when Brandon Ayuk starts practicing. And I've heard that he's possibly going to hold out. Now there's a potential he's going to hold in, that he's going to show up for practice. Whether he gets a deal done or not, at some point he's going to have to start practicing with the San Francisco 49ers. And I think the sooner rather than later is the best situation. You don't want to go into the season where Ayuk isn't ready to go, isn't comfortable. And he's been working through the preseason and training camp the last couple of years and got himself really, really good shape. Last year, he was the star of training camp. He absolutely was taking over practices, dominating against the defense, and making everyone concerned about our defense because he was winning against everyone. Charvarius Ward, win. Deommodore Lenoir, win. It just didn't matter. He got a matchup that he could take advantage of, and he won. So when is Ayuk going to be there is important because the 49ers need Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, all these guys to win a Super Bowl. Now's not the time to mess with the things that are going on. There's no need to trade Brandon Ayuk. And I wish they would get a deal done? I do. But potentially at some point he's going to be there practicing. And when that is going to be important. Hopefully by week 2, the way Deebo was, they'll get something done or they'll come to an agreement. He's going to play on his 5th-year option. So that way he gets acclimated, gets out there in the pads, works into the season form, and the 49ers feel comfortable with their personnel groupings, and Brandon Ayuk win this offense. The good thing is he's been in the system for 4 years. You understand what Kyle wants from him. He knows this offense and his position inside and out, and he'll be just fine. So those are some of the biggest questions heading into training camp and the preseason. I hope you guys all enjoyed the episode. Please let me know what you think are some of the big questions. Do you agree with me? And then if you got some answers for them, I'd love to hear that as well. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. A huge surge lately, everyone listening, so I really appreciate that. And, of course, this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.